Morning, Josh.
Good morning.
As
How
I
are
said,
you?
I'm very good. How are you? This looks very good. Your backdrop here. Is this all new? It's looking really good. I should tell you.
No, I think I've just lit it differently.
Oh, really? It looks great. I should tell you, last week there were several people admiring your Jimi Hendrix poster in the background, which I forgot to read out to you at that time.
Oh, really?
Yes, absolutely. And why not, indeed. Right, listen, let's get cracking, right? I want to go with one of your stories, first of all, because I think it's so important to what we do, and that is about the FBI leaking James O'Keefe's emails to the New York Times. Give us the background to that, Josh.
Okay, so I want to clarify that we don't absolutely know it was the FBI, but so Project Veritas has obviously been doing a lot of work that's been a thorn in the side of the US establishment. They were covering CNN, Facebook, YouTube. They did some investigation into stories regarding Joe Biden's daughter's diary that had gone missing. And anyway, so the FBI raided O'Keefe's house and reportedly looking for the diary. And then the next day or so, New York Times releases a collection of secret Project Veritas confidential legal documents after the FBI had seized James O'Keefe's phone. And there really is no other way that the New York Times could have got this. And they sort of gleefully published Project Veritas asking for a legal opinion on how the work that they were doing could be considered, legal, to make sure they weren't breaking any laws. Like, this is pretty standard journalistic practice. And the New York Times just published this like some sort of got you.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely insane because this is horrendously illegal.
Yeah.
First off. And then I'm stunned that Twitter are even like allowing the link to be shared, because I don't know if you remember, there was a New York Post story about Hunter Biden's laptop that wasn't allowed to be shared on Twitter because the source was obtained illegally, that they said, they wouldn't share a link with that. And this is literally what we're looking at here.
I know, one rule for one and one rule for the other. And of course, as you say, we don't have categoric proof, but the attorney for James O'Keefe obviously accuses the Department of Justice of leaking info to the New York Times, says the Times knew of the raid moments after it occurred, suggests that the Department of Justice is the source of legal communications leaked to the paper. And obviously, days after the raid, a judge ordered the Department of Justice to stop extracting data from 2 phones which were confiscated from James O'Keefe's New York residence. This is pretty outrageous. And obviously, you've just given us 2 examples of them and us, right? And that is Hunter Biden's phone and James O'Keefe. And James O'Keefe obviously represents a type of alternative media that isn't to the advantage of like the New York Times, which is fast becoming part of old media. And obviously Project Veritas, much more groundbreaking, prepared to go in there on the edge of things, literally breaking stories. And so this is a real worry about, well, for people like you and I, Josh, about what we do, because this also infringes on our practices as well. If we can have law enforcement handing over correspondence to newspapers.
Yeah, it's shocking. It's like, don't poke the bear of the establishment, or they will send the intelligence agencies to your house and then leak what they find. Like, that is a stunningly dangerous road to be headed down. I mean, I hope there's some sort of investigation, but one of the things that actually makes it way worse is that Project Veritas are currently like tied up in legal issues with the New York Times. Like, they're currently involved in a court battle, and the New York Times is producing this information, like leaking confidential legal information like against someone that they are currently in court with. It's like,
I mean, it is gobsmacking. We've reached just such a new era of madness where, and it's not to say that there wasn't corruption before, that this wasn't happening before. It's just everything is now transparent. It's like it's happening in plain sight, and people are just like, I think, almost gobsmacked. I think it's so blatant that in itself makes people believe it's not true.
Yeah, and the problem as well, when they start to selectively remove links on social media platforms, is that there is no like objective standard. There is no like digital rule of law or like convention to stick to, especially because I don't know, if you look at like traditional outlets, they've maybe been able to hold on to the ability to say things more than independent journalists, perhaps. Just with the way the internet has evolved, because they have like that institutional clout, and the internet has no precedence, and therefore we're kind of like swimming in a without, I don't know. It's like the mainstream press are on the road and they can see like the faded like road markings, whereas the internet is just like a big open like space with no lines.
Yeah, which is why they obviously want the online harms bill to come into effect. And then you have like Harry and Meghan, who are working incredibly hard to clamp down on the internet. And a lot of it is, I think, with people like Harry and Meghan, is they hate the level of criticism they're subjected to, you know, and we've seen it before. We've seen it repeatedly before. People saying hello to you here. Raycam points out that Project Veritas didn't publish anything from the diary. They handed it over to the Department of Justice, then got raided, which in itself obviously is absolutely outrageous. Thank you, Darren. Love the cut. Thank you. Josh. Hi, Josh. Looking forward to a great show, says Darren. Defer says, surely this diary is just a distraction from something else as usual. Do you think it's a distraction?
Oh, I hadn't even thought of it like that.
I know.
I mean, to be honest, we look at everything like that. You know, everything that Boris does is as a dead cat. You know, but I mean, it could be a distraction from something but to be honest, it seems like to me pretty clear cut that it's just attempting to intimidate James O'Keefe, who dared to, stand against the conventional narrative and do things a little differently.
Exactly. And do you think that, I mean, that's a good point you make there. And that is, you know, everything seems to be a dead cat. And do you think we are in danger of assuming, as you say, that everything is? And so what it actually does is it distracts us. So, for example, when I was saying early on about what was happening with COVID and the elderly people in the care homes, people were saying to me, nobody's dying from COVID. I'm like, these are elderly people who have been kicked out of NHS hospitals and they are not protected and they're dying. And so the problem is with everybody thinking that everything is a false flag or everything is a red herring, it sometimes means that we are actually missing real injustices, right?
And I guess this is one of the things that make people think that the last 2 years have been a huge psyop, really, isn't it? That the mass confusion is difficult to tell what's going on. You know, you can believe nothing really at this point, right? I will read something and even I don't believe it until I've seen it confirmed by like 15 different people, and even then I'm like,
That's the state we've got to, isn't it? Absolutely, state we've got to. Morning all of you. Oh, the live chat is busy as anything. Lovely to see you all. Yes, Raycam, Project Veritas were exposing big pharma officials, saying Vax is funding all pharma now. That's why they are a target. And that, I believe, has some truth in it. Absolutely. Yes, Ricky, the elderly were murdered. There's no doubt about it. Right, Josh, let's move on to the next story. We'll obviously keep an eye on that because there's so many twists and turns involved in it. As I say, that does impact on people like you and I, so we have to be incredibly careful. Now, the story that I want to cover is to do with Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, which I think is an outrageous injustice. Richard Ratcliffe has just ended 21 days of a hunger strike. I mean, I go half a day without food and I'm flopping all over the place. I don't know how anybody can go 21 days. He just had fluids. He said that he had promised his wife that he would end the protest because their child needs 2 parents, quite correct. Obviously, for anybody who doesn't know by now, Nazanin was detained, leaving Iran in, I think it was 2016. Yes, she was arrested there. She was taking the couple's daughter, Gabriella, to see her family. She was accused of plotting to overthrow the government, even though she said she was on holiday. She served 4 years of a 5-year sentence in Tehran and 1 under house arrest. Then suddenly she was presented with yet more charges. And of course, Josh, there's this issue of a debt between UK and Iran of over 400 million, which her husband Richard believes that Nazanin was taken in the first place because of that debt, and it was nothing to do with anything. She was literally being held as a bargaining chip. What are your thoughts about all this?
So I was looking at this last night, and I'm not sure. It's an interesting one. The thing that like tips me in the direction of thinking it might be true is that Dominic Raab had said that Iran was using her in a cat and mouse game, and that to me suggests that he's sort of saying that she's just being played with by the two regimes, and the British government had been using like the excuse of EU sanctions against Iran in order to sort of like hold up and yeah, just to hold up the payment. And then there was Iranian officials who had come to like progress the court proceedings on this in 2013, and they had their visas revoked.
Yeah.
They were detained and then deported 3 days later. And apparently it's because the British government doesn't want them to use the money in Yemen, Syria, and Lebanon, which I don't know. I can believe that, but at the same time, I'm like, really, the British government concerned about like funding like terrorism and you know war in shady parts of the world? It's
That's
like,
right, Josh. That's right. I mean, come on, please.
yeah. Because like I can totally believe that they would have those concerns because you know obviously they have their own foreign policy goals, whatever we think of them.
Yes.
But I'm not sure that seems to be the real reason they won't pay. But I don't know. Maybe they're just cheap. Maybe it's they're stubborn and it's on principle. But it really does seem like because there was a US prisoner, I think, or a couple of prisoners who were released in exchange for payment of an old debt of about $400,000, or sorry, $400 million. So there's precedent for like Iran using prisoners as bargaining chips in order to get debts paid.
Right.
So I don't know. And
It's
yeah,
really tricky, isn't it?
Richard was told by the military investigators this was the reason that she wasn't being released, and I know it would suggest that perhaps that's why they're not talking about, why the British government are sort of reluctant to talk about it, because they've got their own sort of thing that they don't want to mention. This is why they don't want to, you know, have a release or push it too hard. But it could also just be Boris Johnson being like, can this woman not just go away? I'm trying to, you know, deal with other things.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that he has to a degree reneged on his sort of promises to the family anyway, because he was originally, you know, pushing for her release as foreign secretary. But of course, he made like quite serious bloopers. He's obviously suggested that she was out there training people to be a journalist, which is also problematic. Esther says Josh should be on every show. You a fan of Josh, Esther? D first says, was she not up to something hard to tell? Well, that is the thing. It is hard to tell. But either way, she's already been there 5 years, right? She's already served 5 years. That is a child growing up without the mother. You know, I mean, there is so much else going on that we have to question it. And so Ray Kenny, she wasn't a spy. The government would be talking about her all the time, not the press talking about her. As husband are the press now. So Ray, can you believe she was a spy? Okay, all right. Well, I actually don't. I don't, but you know, my mind is open. Who knows? But it certainly doesn't appear to be okay that she is now being used as a bargaining chip, of which I am in no doubt whatsoever. That at least I am in no doubt about. So it's a pretty horrendous situation. I felt so sorry for her husband. Boris Johnson obviously didn't even visit her husband while he was on his hunger strike, which I thought was really like, the optics were even bad on that. I mean, Boris Johnson is an amoral individual, as we know, but even he's quite good at PR and knows where and when to show up, and he didn't. And Keir Starmer showed up and Angela Rayner showed up, and none of that is obviously very good for him at all. Thank you, Chris. Awesome start to the show. BNT producing the best breakfast show around, with Sonia showing MSM the way we love that, don't we, Josh? Now, listen, I think we have got time quickly to cover the story that you also wanted. Let's at least comment on it, because it is important. and that is about the proposed decrease in the repayment threshold for student loans. Now, I'm completely biased about this. My daughter is a student. I think what happened over the last year is outrageous, that these students are paying, you know, 9,000 a year, and they're not even getting the university experience. They're having to do Zooms. What are your thoughts about it, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously a little bit biased because I am I will be a victim of this policy. But to me, I was just thinking about it last night, and I was really getting quite mad about it. So I was like, so they set it up as inflation rate interest, government-backed loan. Here's the terms and conditions. We were like, okay, you know, you've screwed us on the tuition fees, but fair enough. You know, you've set up a system where, you know, it's not going to be particularly onerous upon us to pay it back. Then they sold most of the debt to private companies who started jacking up the interest.
Right.
Now they're trying to retroactively change the terms of the contract to make us pay it back at a lower threshold. And it's like that, on top of the national insurance scandal that was going around, the cuts to universal credit, the printing piles and piles of money to hand to their friends and inflate the value of the currency and leave all of us poorer and worse off as a result of it, and crash the economy with the COVID measures, and oversee the greatest upward transfer of wealth. And it's just kicking sand in our faces at this point.
Really?
It's like the tax burden is the highest it's been in decades, and it's all falling upon the poorest people in the country. And like I was thinking about it last night. I was like, how many times can they just kick sand in our teeth and like just get us when we're down, and people to just accept it? It really frustrates me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are really beaten down. Tink reminds me of a very good point, and that is Nick Clegg sold all the students out. He did, didn't he? I mean, come on, you get into a coalition. He just wanted some power, and he knew he was never going to get power as the leader of Lib Dems, and so that was his opportunity. Yes, defer Nick Clegg, yuck. I once chased him, but that's a whole other story for a whole other time. Listen, Josh, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's been an absolute pleasure. You've got a lot of fans going on in these live chats here. Yes, we will be bringing Josh back if he'll have us. Josh, have a brilliant Monday. Thank you so much. Take good care of yourself. Cheers.
You too, Sonia. Thank
See
you.
you soon. Bye.
Bye.